Welcome to this edition of Real World White Collar Law, where we talk about real world issues in the field of white collar law and corporate compliance affecting businesses. I'm Stephanie Wilson, a partner here at Berenzweig, Leonard, and a director of our firm's government contracts practice.
And I'm David Deitch. I'm the lead for the white collar criminal defense and corporate compliance practice here at Berenzweig, Leonard.
So David, today we're here actually to discuss a topic that overlaps both of our practice areas, and that is the Federal Government Contractor Code of Business Ethics and Conduct. And so this is the start of a new year. This is a time of year where we often meet with our business clients and discuss and recommend that they review their various corporate policies and procedures, make sure they have everything that's required in place, and anything that they do have is up to date. And so the Contractor Code of Business Ethics and Conduct is one policy that I think is sometimes overlooked. No one really thinks, hopefully, that they've got fraud or corruption going on in their business, right? And so, they don't necessarily keep this in front of mind. But really, this policy is one that is a proactive measure to make sure that companies, have procedures in place to basically prevent criminal activity. And so I think what we want to talk about today is get back to basics a little bit, talk about what is this Code of Business Ethics and Conduct, and why it's important even for those companies that think, they don't have any ethics issues or compliance or fraud going on in their company.
I think that's right, Stephanie. I mean, this is, to use a metaphor that's kind of appropriate here in 2021, this is like a vaccination for your government contracting business. It's part of a broader principle in the Federal Acquisition Regulations, the FAR, that talk about detection and timely reporting of criminal activity in businesses that have government contracts. And the Code of Business Ethics and Conduct is an important part of that. It's just something that people don't talk about and you don't hear a lot about, but it's really kind of a time bomb ticking in there in a lot of contracts that contractors need to watch out for.
So when we're talking today about, this specific Code of Business Ethics and Conduct, what exactly is it that we're talking about? Is it a policy? Are there specific requirements? Kind of what are some of the fundamentals that companies should be aware of?
Well, there are general policies that apply to all government contractors that require that contractors, to put it very generally, be on the alert for possible criminal conduct in their businesses. But for what are called covered contracts, there are very special requirements. Now, a covered contract for these purposes is a government contract for more than $5 million that has a duration of more than 120 days. So if you're a contractor, regardless of what the size of your business is, and you have a contract that is a covered contract, your contract also has a provision in it that requires a number of things relating to a code of business ethics and conduct. And there are a bunch of parts which I can go through very briefly. The first is you have to have a code of business ethics and conduct. This is going to be a set of rules about how the business is run in a way that allows for detection and prevention of crime, of criminal acts as part of the execution of the government contract. And it has to be in writing and it has to be available to all of your employees. The second thing is that you have to exercise due diligence to prevent and detect any crimes that are going on. And this is important. And you also have to promote an organizational culture of compliance with the law and the idea that you're going to detect and prevent those crimes from happening. And then finally, you have to make timely disclosure if you discover credible evidence that certain kinds of crimes like fraud or bribery or gratuities have been committed on your watch. And these are all things that are incorporated into a clause that the FAR requires be included in those covered contracts. So, and then finally, there's actually one more. I said three, but there's really a fourth one that only applies if you are not a small business, and that requires a certain kind of training programs and compliance programs and internal controls that exist. But those don't apply to smaller companies or to contracts for acquisition of commercial goods.
So if you're one of the smaller companies and you don't have any contracts that necessarily are covered contracts under this, is it still important to have some sort of policy in place? Like why would a company who, they're behaving ethically, their employees are, as to their knowledge, doing timekeeping correctly, cost tracking correctly, and all of that, why is it important for those companies who are not necessarily holding these covered contracts to still have some sort of policy in place?
Well, the real reason is, to use that vaccination metaphor again, it's the same reason you get a vaccination even though you don't think you're going to get sick. It's because it could happen. And if it happens, the consequences are dire. If an employee commits an act of bribery, an act of a violation of the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act if you're overseas, or some other related crime, a False Claims Act violation, anything that exposes or constitutes a federal criminal act under any of those statutes, prosecutors are going to look, and the government in general is going to look to the company as a responsible party because the company was the entity that had control over that employee. So if you have taken acts to protect yourself, to create an environment in which you are seeking to prevent that kind of conduct and seeking to detect it if it happens, you become the good guy. And being the good guy is always the better place to be when either a contracting officer is looking with a skeptical eye at the way you've executed a contract, or a federal prosecutor is looking at whether your company should be held responsible for breaking the law. And that's true even when it's not strictly speaking required.
So, I mean, having a written policy, both this kind of policy and just broadly, I mean, that's not necessarily just a box to check, right? You don't want to have any policy that's sort of on paper, stuck in a file, or just something saved on your computer. You actually have to put some procedures into place. So, what are some things that companies should be doing here to make sure that they are in compliance?
Well, companies, first of all, should make sure that they have an actual code of conduct. In other words, not just something that you got off the internet and forgot to change the names that were on it from the last person who used it, but have someone either inside your company or outside counsel prepare a code of conduct that is specific to your business and sets up a system that's going to work and is going to actually promote that culture of compliance within your business. Then you have to actually act on it. There should be periodic reviews where you update it each year. There should be training for your employees, making sure they know that that code of conduct exists. There should be opportunities and mechanisms so your employees are able to act and inform you as an owner or a manager that there have been suspicious activities that you may need to look into so that you are being diligent about looking at these things. So it's really, you're right, Stephanie, it's really more than simply checking the box. It's more than having a piece of paper that you throw in a file and wave around at people if this comes up. It's a matter of actually not just looking like you're being diligent about trying to prevent crime and promote compliance, but actually doing it.
Right. So, I mean, I think that this has been a very useful conversation, and this is obviously something I think that we will continue to discuss with our clients, like I said, at the start of this year, as we're discussing policies and procedures with them.
Yeah, Stephanie, if I could add one more thing, just so the viewers know how important this is. The consequences of not taking these actions are really serious. If you have a covered contract that requires this business code of conduct and you do not do it, that could be a default in your contract. It can also be a basis for suspension or debarment, and it can also expose you and your company to criminal liability. So this is an important topic, and we've only covered it really briefly today. But I hope that people who watch this will understand how important it is. And if you're a government contractor, I hope you'll take action to follow through.
So thank you, David. I'm glad we were able to have this discussion today. It's obviously a very important topic, and this is something that we will be discussing with our clients at the start of the new year. And so I want to thank you for your time today, and also thank everyone else who's joined us watching online.